Welcome to the review of Wizardry 7, Crusaders of the Dark Savant. Wizardry 7 is a role-playing game that was created by Sir Tech and released in 1992. The person that actually designed and developed the game almost in entirety is d.w. Bradley. He also created Wizardry 6, Bane of the Cosmic Forge. So if you haven't seen my review on Wizardry 6 first, I'd recommend watching that one before this one. The story from Wizardry 6 actually carries on in Wizardry 7, and depending on if you beat the game, it will transfer your characters and continue the story from a different point, depending on which ending you received in Wizardry 6. Wizardry 7 also is a fantasy/sci-fi game. It's kind of amazing. It takes place in the past and the future. There's a nice combination. So as the game begins, you're presented with the main menu here, and there's a security clearance or copy protection mechanism. So we're going to be importing characters from Bane of the Cosmic Forge. So you simply say the directory and the file name, and it imports in and gives you a different story depending on where you were at in the game or if you had beaten the game. There are some characters that are different that were not in Wizardry 6. One of the main ones you're going to run across a lot is Domina. And there's races that are kind of battling each other. You have the T-Rang, Upani, and as I mentioned, there's a combination of futuristic technology and technology of the past. So the story continues by you landing on the planet Guardia, and you're going to be looking for another powerful artifact called the Astral Domina. You can also create your characters from scratch if you're not transferring, and you simply name your character, choose a race, sex, and profession based on the bonus points you received. So some of the professions are much harder to get, just like in Wizardry 6. You assign your bonus points, and then you choose your portrait. There's a nice wide variety of graphics to choose for your characters, which is nice. And then you start assigning skill points. There's weaponry, physical, and academia. And later you'll see that there's also personal skills in this game. And then spellcasters can get spells from the 6 different categories. And then finally you get a random karma value. And you just keep repeating this process until you get as many characters as you want. Of course, you'll almost always want 6, because the more the better. But as I mentioned, I'm transferring my characters. So here are my party members from Wizardry 6. And you don't actually have to beat Wizardry 6 to transfer them. The characters will transfer up to level 5, so if you've gone way beyond level 5, you'll get downgraded to level 5. It has a save game feature, which is of utmost importance because this game is very difficult and long. You can have multiple saved games. But let's take a look at the party members I have transferred. So I was above level 5, but you can see it kind of assigns your skill points based on what you had in the previous game, downgraded to level 5. So I have a Hobbit Bard, and I have an Elf Ranger. The Rangers have actually improved quite a bit in Wizardry 7. They can use more equipment. They're almost more like a fighter. I have a Fairy Alchemist. I have a Human Monk, who incidentally still has the hands and feet skill and Karijitsu for doing critical hits. So all the previous skills are still there, plus there's some new ones. We have a Human Valkyrie. And we have a Dwarf Lord. So all of these characters can actually cast spells because of the professions I chose, and I did that for a reason. As I mentioned, you get some of your equipment to transfer, and they chose to not completely overpower you, so if you had some really powerful equipment, you'll typically only get one, maybe two of those items. But the assay skill is still there, where you can look and see who can equip given equipment. It shows you the race and the classes. So you can drag and drop your equipment now onto the body on the right to equip, which is really cool. It's much more mouse friendly than Wizardry 6 was. And we still have the Studded Cur Bra +2. Your spells transfer as well, downgraded to level 5. Kind of get assigned random ones there as well. So as you can see, the Bard at level 5 even got a few spells. Same with the Ranger. And the Monk. This is what it looks like in Wizardry 6, by the way. You can see I was a level 9 monk, and it transferred some of his items pretty well. Here's another comparison. Here's my Lord and what he had. He had a Skull Dagger, which interestingly enough translated to what's called a Poison Dagger in this game, because Wizardry 7 doesn't have the Skull Dagger. Okay, so the overall layout of the game is the graphics in the center, of course, is what you're looking at. Your characters, just like in Wizardry 6, are on the left and right of that screen. The bottom, you have different controls. If you click on a party member or you click an option at the bottom, you can then select a party member. The top shows you different special effects that are working at the moment. You can either move with the mouse by clicking the arrows at the bottom, or you can use a keyboard, and all text appears toward the bottom typically. So as you wander around, as you first begin, you'll quickly run into your first encounter. So just like in Wizardry 6, you're presented with the monsters in the center of the screen, and toward the bottom it shows groups of monsters. So on the left side of each row it shows the number of monsters, and then it gives the name or category of the monster depending on your mythology skill. And then the right side shows how many are active or able to actually do something to take an action during combat. So you can choose to attack, use items, cast spells, parry. There's all kinds of different options. If you do choose to cast a spell, you click on the magic category, then you choose the spell, and then the level at which you want to cast the spell. The level basically either increases the damage, the duration, etc. And then toward the bottom, as combat begins, it tells you the situation and the status of each attack and action. You can change the delay on the messages, by the way, to speed them up or to slow them down, depending on your preference. In the beginning, typically you keep it slower so you can read what's going on, but as the game progresses, you speed them up and just fly through combat. You can even switch your equipment during combat, and it presents you with the inventory screen. and then you can choose to equip something if you need to. As combat ends, you of course get experience points, and it is split for the entire party. Each member doesn't get different experience based on what they did. Each survivor gets experience, so if you die, you're out of luck. Now, when you attack physically, you can either miss, you can hit and do damage, or you can hit and not penetrate the armor. There's all kinds of different types of attacks. You can lash, kick, swing, melee. If you have an extended melee weapon, you can attack from positions 4 through 6. Or if you have a ranged weapon, you can do that as well. You can shoot from the back. You can cast special magic spells such as Enchanted Blade, which will show you at the top as it'll flash. Armor Plate as well. You can hide if you have the ninjutsu skill. And then if you attack, you can do what's called a backstab or a surprise attack and do a lot more damage. And they enhanced the sound by quite a bit in the game. Now it has Sound Blaster capability, ad-lib for music, all kinds of different options. It sounds much better than the PC speaker. The ironic thing is there is a bug in DOSBox so that the PC speaker actually uses Sound Blaster, and if you choose Sound Blaster, it uses PC speaker. So this is on PC speaker. There's very pretty scenery in the game. The upgrade to the graphics engine is fantastic. It goes from basically EGA to VGA. There's a lot more terrain too, which is cool. Wizardry 6 was kind of limited with the backdrops. There's various signs you'll run across during the game that try to indicate where you're at. Certain areas of the game are restricted and you have to use a password to get in. Even getting into the first town, which is called New City, requires a password. You'll run across a lot of locked doors in Wizardry 7, even more so than Wizardry 6. The way you get in is very similar. You try to open the door and you can either force it with brute strength. If the green bars go farther to the right than the red bars, that works. Or you can try to pick the lock using skullduggery. So here's an example of not being able to open the door, and we keep trying to force it, and finally we get the green bars to match the red bars, and it opens. As your strength goes up, it becomes easier to get in, but there are some doors that you can't open unless you get the red all the way to the right. If a door ends up getting jammed, then you have to either use special keys or a knock-knock spell to get in. As you encounter monsters, they'll appear as generic groups such as these lesser demons until your mythology skill determines their actual name. During combat, when you're choosing your spells, you first pick the category of magic and then you pick the level. So we have debuffing type spells such as Charm, Blinding, Slow, Confusion, and we have the silly web and sleep effects again, where flying monsters that get put to sleep suddenly stop in midair. That's always one of the quirky things about the Wizardry series. Dispel Undead is a very powerful spell in this game because you will run across a lot of undead creatures, and as you cast more powerful level, you can destroy some of the most powerful undead, including even skeleton lords. There's a Zap Undead spell which does a lot of damage, same with Deep Freeze and Crush. Fire Bomb is an area effect spell that hits multiple monsters. And noxious fumes does as well, but can also nauseate the enemies. There's mass attacks like deadly air, which hits all the monsters. Nuclear blast does as well. Same with mind flay. You can also cause monsters to become insane with certain types of spells, and they'll attack each other. Word of death hits every monster, no matter how many there are. There's the return of prismic missile, which has all kinds of random effects. And there's the death type spells that just kill enemies outright. And there's even a death cloud, which will try each combat round to kill an enemy. You have protective spells such as Missile Shield, which protects you from ranged attacks. You can cast Armor Shield, heal wounds during combat, or you can even heal with a Lifesteal spell, which does damage and drains that back to your characters. You can even resurrect during combat and the character will be able to fight right away. There's the fun conjure type spells, which can bring monsters forth to fight for the party during a battle. Here, for example, we summon Spectre Moths, and they will attack during random times during the battle. For some reason, I always find it fun to have monsters in the party attacking the enemy, even if they aren't that effective at times. Depending on what level of conjuration spell you cast, you'll get weaker or more powerful monsters. The conjuration spell summons Spectre Moths, Dinkle Wisps, some creature that I can't pronounce its name. And then you also have an alternative with Alchemist called the Create Life spell, where you can even get a Godzilla type creature. Notice the spelling. You can only summon one set of creatures at a time though. If you try to summon more than one, it'll tell you that nothing appears. The cool thing is you'll end up encountering some of the monsters that you summon at some point. So here's the Bantari or Bantari. Here's Phantasmagoras. You can see what they look like. But the monsters actually provide a pretty good meat shield too. Sometimes they'll take the hits from the monsters and prevent you from getting hit. There's cloud type spells like Acid Cloud, which will do damage every round as the creatures are still alive. It'll even keep going after the monsters die. Poison has a somewhat similar effect where once the monsters are poisoned, they'll take damage each round, and sometimes they'll just tell you that one of them died. Poison gas is kind of a double whammy because they take the poison damage plus every round the poison gas reactivates. You can also find artifacts that have spells such as Poison Bomb or Stink Bomb that you throw and have similar effects, cause nausea, do damage. You can get scrolls and cast them, which use the scribing skill. Any type of other object that you use is the artifact skill, unless you equip it and throw it. Bards have the ability to play musical instruments, just like in Wizardry 6, using the musical skill. But if you equip and throw an object, it's guaranteed to go off. It's just using your throwing skill. The disadvantage to that is you have to re-equip if your hands become empty. You can even use potions in combat to get healed. However, one disadvantage to using the artifact skill is it can fizzle and fail. When you throw it, that can't happen. You can even fizzle scrolls because they use the scribing skill. You can also fizzle spells depending on your spellcasting ability. So monsters can have all kinds of special type attacks, such as squirting burning pollen and irritating you. They can cause you to fall unconscious. They may have bite or claw attacks, or can sting you and poison you. Some throw poison darts. So as you can see, there's such a wide variety of attacks. It makes this game super fun. You'll even run into enemies that have blasters, futuristic weapons, or can breathe acid on you. Hit the whole party. It may seem like I'm all over the place trying to describe this, but what I'm trying to do is give you a feel for this wide variety of combat options and things that happen during this game. These weird jellymagas even invoked what's called demon power, whatever that means. Some enemies will just cast damage type spells at you, either hit single or multiple party members. Or some may cast debuff spells such as weaken or slow. In fact, they can even silence you, which works on all your casters except for alchemist type casters. Hold monster spell will paralyze you, and they can even summon monsters at times. Sometimes you'll run across spellcasters that cast cloud spells on you as well, which of course have the same effect as it does on the monsters and hit you every round. Outside combat, you can cast Magic Screen to help with this before a battle. It reduces not only some damage, but some of the durations of spells or intensity as well. Anti-magic you can cast, but that's during combat. Sometimes monsters will flee if battle's not going their way, and sometimes when they try to flee, you can block them. And if you try to run in certain cases, you will get blocked as well. For example, trying to fight this Doom creature, I could never get away. But one amazing feature that was added to Wizardry 7, terminate game. So that you can instantly get out of battle and reload the game. So once you defeat monsters, sometimes you're given random treasure, although that doesn't happen too often. Certain types of monsters like demons seem to give them much more often. You'll also find random treasure in a lot of chests during the game. The artifact skill is used in Wizardry 7 in order to be able to assay or identify an item. Otherwise it'll have a question mark and you're not sure what it is. Depending on the complexity of the item, you need a higher artifact skill. You can try to equip something, but you just don't know what's going to happen if you use it. Sometimes it could be cursed. But basically you have to have at least one character with a high assay, and then you'll pass the item to them and let them identify it. Sometimes you'll see scrolls that you can read and it'll give you text information, or see that it's just bad equipment. You can identify scrolls, and on the left side it'll show you the power level, and on the right side it'll show you the number of charges. Incidentally, there is a recharge spell you can cast in order to add to the number of charges for an item. Here we just went from 10 to 11 charges. Musical instruments have unlimited charges, so they show a max next to them. Now, one feature that is amazing that was added was the ability to drop objects and pick them up later. They appear in the bottom right corner as a little graphic. You simply select the item, click on the character, and they pick it up. Wizardry 6 suffered from this issue where you could beat a battle and get some items, but your party members are full and you would actually permanently lose the items. After combat, you may level up depending on the experience points earned and where you were at. You'll get random attribute increases, up to level 18 of course. Get some hit point and stamina bonuses and some skill bonuses that you can distribute across your weaponry, physical, and academia. One of the best aspects of the Wizardry series is character development. You really spend a lot of time improving your characters and making them progress onward, customizing them in exactly the way you want them to be. You also may learn spells as you level up. You pick the category, and of course, choose the spell. Sometimes it's wise to choose a category that has no spell points yet so that you can start increasing them as you level up. Sometimes you can even get multiple spells when you level up. Eventually you'll start becoming more powerful, getting a level 11 monk for example. Now we're up to level 21 Valkyrie, and there really doesn't seem to be much of a limit. Here I have a level 143 monk, and you can see I've maxed out pretty much all of his skills, or her skills. You have the ability to change professions in Wizardry 7, just like you could in Wizardry 6, which is fantastic. When you change professions, your attributes drop to the minimum requirement for that given profession, but you retain all the skills and spells that you had learned. Now, you do lose some advantages while the character is a lower level in the new profession, but as you get back to around the same level you were before, all of that returns. Also, you could always change your portrait later on to represent the new profession. Now, outside combat, you will be doing a lot of healing. You can do this in multiple ways. Sometimes you just cast the Heal Wounds spell, or there's another one called Healthful, which hits all party members, or even Restful, which increases stamina on all party members. You can use potions to recover hit points and stamina, and sometimes you may stumble across fountains that can heal you or return stamina. Of course, you can just rest, which plays a nice little tune and even sometimes shows the background graphics change as it becomes night. It's a really nice touch. Here we can see the moon going across the horizon as we rest. Sometimes resting can fix certain conditions. For example, here we became vegified. Basically it means you're insane, and we're waiting for a certain period of time, and you see the little icon next to some of the characters that looks like a mad face. It will start to disappear, but again, that only works with certain conditions. And it depends on the strength of the condition you have. Some spells or traps will make the condition much worse and last a lot longer. You can cast certain spells like Sane Mind to instantly remove a problem. And then some statuses will not improve resting. For example, here my Lord Lance is diseased, and as I rest his conditions actually worsen, and it becomes stoned and insane. So this is where you'd want to use a potion or cast a spell to cure the disease. There's also safer places to rest, such as an inn. But I say safer because even at the inn, I found that as I rested for a while, I was surprised by some demented monks. WTF, get out. You'll also run across certain NPCs that can lead to healing. Like this guy, for example, if you donate enough money, he had a fountain that would cure you based on how much you donated. You can find special artifacts like Ankhs of Youth that will reduce your age and then be used up after you invoke the power. But there is a limit to most artifacts. For some reason your age can't go below 18. Some of the other Ankhs are Ankhs of Might that increase your strength, and it can increase it beyond 18. You can actually get up to 20 this way. There's other things like this Valentine necklace, and sometimes you'll run into special events where as you're walking you'll just suddenly see some text appear at the bottom of the screen. You'll run into all kinds of traps in this game, such as silence or nausea, blinding traps, typical damage type traps. And you'll even run into weird things such as these wild orchids that will put you to sleep and make you wake up somewhere else. And then you have to try to figure out where in the world you are. There is a search option in the game to look for objects at certain positions. And you'll run into many treasure chests in the game. Then you have to choose if you want to just open, disarm, spell, or use an item to get in. Depending on your level of skullduggery, of course, determines how well you can disarm the trap. Sometimes you can even look like you have a good chance. 48% chance, pretty good. And I inspected and could see where the trap was, which one it is. It's the life stealer. So we're getting pretty close and oops, accidentally set it off. There's many different types of traps. There's toxic gas, poison darts, psionic bolts, even a demonic force which smiles after it gives you a beating. You can be turned to stone, but as you get more skilled and your skullduggery goes up, of course your chance to disarm increases. It is really cool how it's kind of like a puzzle and it shows you which buttons to click. That's a nice touch. Of course you can kind of cheat and use the knock knock spell if you get it, but it actually doesn't work on really powerful chests, even if you cast it all the way up. Sometimes you'll find special items in treasure chests and you may get experience points. And there is a levitate spell, which I thought may make you be able to go over a pit, but it doesn't work. There is also a swimming ability in this game, and if you don't have the skill on each party member, certain ones can drown. And it uses up a lot of stamina as you swim. It seems to be percentage based. Incidentally, in the water you can encounter enemies such as fish. You'll find cool transportation mechanisms like this boat, which you have to unlock in a certain way, and you'll run into dark areas. You have to stumble around trying to find your way out. There's even a city that has invisible walls, which can be quite annoying. You have to try to work your way through a maze. Toward the beginning of the game, you will find a journey map kit, which will use your mapping ability and show you where you've been before, which is really cool. If you transfer characters, you actually start with one. There's a direction spell you can cast, which will show you at the top what direction you're facing. And there's a wizard eye spell, which depending on what level you cast will show an area around you. Here's an example of casting the highest level. It can be beneficial in a dungeon too. There's a locate object spell which will show a little dot on the map if there's something that you can obtain pretty close to you. And there's also a locate person spell. It'll tell you the various NPCs in the game and the areas in which they're at right now. Really cool feature. And depending on what level you cast it, it will give you more information and report more NPCs. Here's just an example casting at the highest level. You'll find a lot of hints in the game. You'll have to write down and try to remember later. And you'll run across special little buttons in the walls. If your scouting ability is high enough, sometimes it'll notify you that you found something. There's also a detect secret spell which shows an eye at the top of the screen, and it'll blink as you get next to something special. The game is just filled with all kinds of NPC or non-player characters. And there's such a wide variety of technologies in the game, it's really cool. Like for example, here's this NPC that flies around on this machine. Just imagine what it'd be like to be in medieval type times and run across something like this. Of course, since there's a mix of magic, you may just think it's some form of magic. If you have good rapport with a given NPC, sometimes they have equipment you can buy. You can always sell your items as well. And they'll give you different values depending on whether or not they could use the equipment or not, which is really cool. You'll run across all kinds of magical items you could buy. But Wizardry does a fantastic job of not overloading you with equipment. It's hard to find really good items, even though there's just a slew of variety. And of course, as the game progresses and you meet more powerful NPCs, they sell better equipment. Here's an example of me trying to sell an Amulet of Life, and they only want to give me 200 gold pieces because they have much better stuff. And some items they won't buy at all. You can try to sell an item that has a question mark next to it, and it may indicate what type of object it is just based on the cost, like if it's powerful or if it's just something normal. The funny thing is sometimes they'll give you a lot for a cursed item. You have the ability to talk with NPCs, and you just start typing in given words and hoping that they will respond. Most of the time, of course, you're typing in words that have no bearing with the NPC whatsoever. And sometimes you can get special items from a given NPC based on what you ask them. There's also a lower button that never really seems to tell you too much. You can try to steal from NPCs using the legerdemain skill, and if you fail and get caught, sometimes they'll leave and other times they'll attack you. It does harm your reputation with them if you steal and you get caught and they leave. So you'll probably be reloading the game if that's the case. If you're successful, sometimes you'll just steal gold. In fact, sometimes you can steal multiple times in the same encounter and they'll never catch on. Other times you'll steal items, and typically the items are the types that are either selling or that you may get by killing them. Here, for example, it shows you that we stole something that he sells. There's also a mind read spell that you can cast, and it will tell you something that the NPC was thinking. Really cool. You can charm NPCs if you don't have a good reputation, and it'll improve your reputation with them. Sometimes they can be pleased or charmed and they still won't trade with you though. For example, here we just have truce as an option. And you do have different options. You can either try to bribe them, say be peaceful, or be aggressive. And each NPC responds differently. For example, we encountered this NPC for the first time, and they're not friendly, so we have to try to truce with them. And we get him mad, and so he attacks. Here's another NPC, Rasputin. Yeah, pretty funny, isn't it? That is one thing that is missing compared to Wizardry 6. There isn't much humor in Wizardry 7. The funny thing is some NPCs do not like when you try to make peace with them, but if you force them, it works. It's quite odd. If you kill an NPC, you usually get treasure, by the way. You'll run into many mini-quests in the game. For example, trying to rescue a woman or a guy demanding money. You'll have cryptic phrases. You have to try to figure out what in the world they're talking about. But a big part of the game is going on scavenger hunts, looking for special items to get you to the next part of the game. Here we have to use this golden idol in a special location. Or a majestic wand to summon a sphinx. And then we have to answer her riddles. You'll also see statues in the game. Nice graphics, by the way. And you'll run across different levers to open up gates, or use special keys to open doors. Gates, by the way, can only be opened with keys or levers. You can't pick them. There's lots of floor puzzles in this game, where you have to walk to certain positions and it switches pits, closed or open. This part of the game could be quite frustrating. A lot of trial and error. You'll run across things where you have options and you have to choose to press things in certain orders. Sometimes the option you choose may result in disease or other damage. But a lot of times it's just trial and error, figuring out the order in which to press things and move on to the next part of the game. Finally, in this particular case, it opens a hole in the wall. You also run across other technologies, such as this computer, and you have to actually log in and type in certain codes in order to communicate with another device. Really cool for magic type game to have high technology like this. We have to use an encoder on a certain book in order to read it and get coordinates. As you can probably tell by now, there's an amazing amount of puzzle solving and special events in this game. It's really fantastic. So now I'll discuss a few more random miscellaneous things. So you have the ability to equip primary and secondary weapons, and if you equip the secondary weapon, you don't get to choose how to attack with it in combat. You only get to choose how to attack with your primary weapon. One of the most fun aspects of this game, at least for me, is matching up given professions and races for the special items that you find during the game. You may find items that can stun or reduce the stamina on enemies or paralyze them. For example, the Pandora's Wand is one of the best types of items, and if you don't have a given class that can actually attack with it, then you may want to consider changing your profession to be able to use it. It can do silly things like paralyze and poison an actual robot, which is pretty cool. And sometimes it can just drain a ridiculous amount of stamina. It also has the ability to critical hit robots. Look at that, that's sweet. You can find Excalibur, which can turn enemies to stone, even spirits and androids. Incidentally, Excalibur can also cast lightning bolts. All kinds of really cool equipment in this game. Now some monsters have high resistance where certain types of effects won't impact them. There's a lot of hidden resistances in this game. Wizardry 7 has its fair share of cursed objects, so you want to make use of the Identify spell to make sure you can tell the benefits and disadvantages. Not all cursed items are really that bad. Sometimes they may have one negative aspect but then have a great side effect as well. And if you equip a cursed object that has a special power, sometimes it'll actually disappear when you use a special power. But besides all the special weapons you'll find in the game, you also run across your fair share of really good armor. And Wizardry 7 does have the same type of armor as Wizardry 6, where you have head, hands, feet, all kinds of hit areas. If you find a book, you can scribe it as long as you have the ability to cast that spell. Some items can be equipped by anyone, and others are only equipped by certain professions. There's even special items that can only be equipped by females. So sometimes it's a combination of female and class. While some items such as the diamond ring exist in Wizardry 7, you can only transfer them from Wizardry 6. Otherwise you can't randomly find them in the game. Some items can provide special regeneration benefits, so as you move around or just perform normal actions, you will get an increase in hit points. And some show special powers that will execute when you invoke them. The Identify spell won't even tell you what that special power is. You just have to use it and hope you can determine what the power was. The Elven Bow, for example, increases your speed. Up to 20, of course. The game also has some ridiculously strong monsters toward the end, but the cool thing is you don't really have to beat them in order to win the game. They just guard really powerful treasures, so it's in your best interest to kill them. Here's the infamous Beast of 1,000 Eye. Notice it's not plural, even though a lot of manuals call it 1,000 Eyes. It is singular. But this is one of the hardest monsters in the game. And basically, it's a level 99 monster, so most of your abilities and spells won't work on it. You just have to try to beat it down. However, if you do get a character up above level 100 or so, such as my monk was level 143, I was able to finally take it out. But the worst thing about this monster was it casts dazzling lights, which can do ridiculous things to your party. And none of your special effects will pretty much work on it because it is so highly resistant and it's such a high level monster. Here's another one that was extremely hard. It's called the Fiend of 9 Worlds. Really difficult to hit him. But what you can do is hide in shadows if you have a really high level ninja or monk and take your chance at doing a critical hit and killing it outright. And that's exactly what I did here. Surprise! There are some what I call non-essential keys which let you into special areas where you can get some really powerful equipment. So even though you don't have to in order to complete the game, it's definitely in your best interest. Here we're finding some very futuristic type equipment, such as a light shield. Really powerful shield for repelling not only damage but giving high resistances. The cool thing is, at this point in the game, you have your choice as to which of these futuristic objects you want to get. Incidentally, some of these weapons you actually load by merging the power packs with the weapon. There is even an alternate way to get in there. If you have the diamond ring from Wizardry 6, you can use it to get one additional item. because by default you only get to choose one out of these 4 items. It might be worth using the diamond ring to get one of these, but that's your call because the diamond ring in of itself is very powerful. So in closing, I'd just like to say Wizardry 7 has such a wide variety of quests, puzzles, equipment you find, monsters you battle, professions you can use and train. It really does feel like you're involved in your own little world. There's a mix of future with magic, with the past. You have scary monsters. You can control and combat how you want to fight. I can't think of a better first-person perspective RPG that I've ever played. It made lots of improvements on Wizardry 6, which was already amazing. We have better graphics. We have much better sound. It's a nice dungeon crawler. Here I'm just fast-forwarding, showing you how you move from place to place and run into all these encounters. You try to find weaknesses with certain monsters, which is a lot of fun. Of course, your character progression is part of the fun, where you're constantly improving and finding items that work with them better. The game engine does a fantastic job of not giving you too much treasure, just giving you a little taste of what you can get so you keep desiring more. There's lots of cool NPCs that you'll run across, and the game has a really creepy feeling. Just look at this water flowing and the shadowing. Very cool environment. You can find special items in very unexpected places. Lots of fun for those that like scavenger hunting. And of course all the mysteries where you have to figure out which items to use where and what kind of benefits they have. Some of them not being essential but just improving things. It's fun that there's a fact that there's a computer in here that you can log into and put in coordinates and communicate with other servers. There's warning signs to kind of tell you that, you know, you better be ready for this or you're going to be screwed trying to come in here. The wide variety of monsters is so much fun. Really cool graphics too. The game has huge replayability because of all this. So overall, this is the best role-playing game, in my opinion, that I've ever played from a character progression point of view. So now I'm going to show you the Dark Savant battle toward the end of the game, and I will show you the ultimate ending. So if you don't want spoilers, please stop watching now. I hope you enjoyed this review of Wizardry 7, Crusaders of the Dark Savant, and I'll see you next time.